I want to welcome you to the Washington State premiere showing of an amazing documentary film, Unseen, How We're Failing Our Parent Caregivers, an unfiltered, honest glimpse into the lives of often exhausted and isolated parent caregivers who have children with developmental disabilities, autism, and medically or behaviorally complex children. My name is Stacy Dim, and I'm the Executive Director of the ARC of Washington State, and I'll be your host for this showing with many, many wonderful kudos to Clallam Mosaic, who brought this film to our attention and are the logistical wizards making sure we could air this film across the state. A little later on, you're going to meet our master moderator, Luis Mendoza from the Washington State Fathers Network, who will facilitate a panel of experts, expert parents, expert researchers, talking about how this film's message resonates with our families across Washington. So we're here today by webinar. That means you can see us, but we cannot hear you or see you much except by the Q&A. So if you have questions or comments, we invite you to please place them in the Q&A. You'll see that box down below on the bar. The chat is available, but Q&A is the better way for us to see your questions. We're going to provide a lot of information in the chat and in Q&A in response to questions. So please keep an eye on those resources. Also, for folks who've joined us this morning, we'll be watching this film in Spanish. Some people will be watching the film in Spanish subtitles. And in that case, we're going to place that information now in the link. Instrucciones en español está en la chat ahora. So go ahead and click on that at any point. And just so you know who's here with us, we're wondering if you could fill out this handy dandy poll that's going to come up. I think they're kind of fun and you'll be able to see live what the results are. So in a second, there we go. You'll see this question pop up and you can click any and all answers that you resonate with. Which of these categories do you identify with? Family caregiver unpaid, family caregiver paid, family of a person with a disability, unpaid non-family caregiver, paid non-family caregiver, self-advocate, person with a disability, a friend of a person with a disability, a support professional and or agency representative, a legislator, or someone else. So once we start to see that populate and it slows down just for a minute, Priya will show us the results and we'll be able to see who's here with us. Okay, so it looks like we have mostly family caregivers or family members, which is wonderful. Some friends and support professionals and self-advocates, which is awesome to see. So it looks right before we start the film, we have put together a very short montage of Washington families who wanted to share their own reflections on raising a child with a developmental disability. You'll see some of these families on our panels today. You'll have seen them if you watch any of the recordings from the last 2 days. We're so grateful that they're willing to join us and let us meet their families and tell us a little more about their own caregiving journey. So we're going to launch that video and we'll be back in just a minute. Please enjoy.
And I can tell everyone that everything changes in a heartbeat when that diagnosis is given to the family.
My children, whom I adore more than anything, both of them, needed a functional parent, and I was the only parent that they had.
Parenting on one hand, and there's caregiving on the other hand, and those are two separate things. And I think often part of the challenge of having, when we think about like disability supports and disability services and how we can support families of kids with disabilities and families of people with disabilities of all ages, we often like lump this family relationship, you know, whether it's the parent or the sibling or whatever it is, with this aspect of caregiving. And for us, like parenting is a joy. Caregiving is a job.
I had called a caregiving agency trying to get a caregiver, and they said it takes at least a week to get set up to have an account with that agency. Our agency never offered anything to try to help us.
This is my 5-year-old Charlie, Can you say hi? Hi. Nice to meet you. Okay, bye. See you later. That was Charlie, and he is autistic, and he's 5 years old, and he is thriving in his preschool class. You also run the real risk of having one, at least, parent drop out of the workforce to be able to give full-time care to the child with developmental disabilities.
I stopped going to work. I stopped going to school. I had to be back on welfare, even though I didn't want it to go, but I had to in order to spend time with my son, in order to also do things that I knew if I went to work and went to school, he will not get the attention at daycare or preschools.
I ran out wrapped in a towel to bring her back in and promised her sister I would never again take a shower and leave her in charge of her older sister in that way. Just an example of what life was like, really 24/7.
You know, is challenging, especially I think through the pandemic. We've had times when we had a shortage of caregivers, the agency had a shortage of caregivers, and I know that's been a challenge across the state and across the country, really, that there's a shortage of the workforce.
And a wise person told me a number of years ago that when one person in your family is developmentally disabled, the entire family is disabled in some fashion. Everything changes. Family relationships, relationships with friends, career aspirations, expectations for your child, your individual freedom and flexibility, and all the milestones you had envisioned for your child.
Thanks to our Washington State families who were kind enough to share their thoughts and their lived experiences with us. That was great. As you can see, families come in a lot of shapes and sizes with the diversity of culture and language supports, and most of all, joy. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the award-winning documentary film, Unseen, How We're Failing Our Parent Caregivers, produced and directed by Tom and Amanda Dyer. This film follows Jess and Ryan Ronnie, a blended family with 8 children, including Lucas, who has profound disabilities. We hope you'll appreciate what it took for this beautiful family to let us peek into their intimate lives and let us all experience the world that they live in. This film and the panel discussion that follows will likely bring a variety of emotions to the surface. You may feel sad, you may feel angry, you may feel uncomfortable. Please use these strong emotions as an opportunity to just listen and understand so that we can all advocate together for change. Parent caregivers often report that they feel invisible and isolated. Many have their work lives affected or are unable to work. Many parents have spent decades caring for their child with no supports or a way to plan for the future. When we asked families involved in these showings what they had hoped to share, it was that our beloved children are not the burden. Failing systems and the lack of help for families are the burden. And while today you're going to see family stories, there are also true stories of policy failures, gaps in our systems, and services that do not exist. We as caregivers really want you to know we love parenting our children. We just need some help. These systems are failing not only individuals with disabilities, with complex medical needs, their families, but also the caring professionals who seek to serve and support them, who often experience the moral distress of not having enough help to offer. Our wish is that everyone attending these screenings, parents and caregivers, professionals, elected officials, self-advocates who experience disabilities, community members, that you will join us in truly hearing and believing these stories and be driven to help us change the situation. This film shares the raw truth about the challenges families face that many family caregivers have shared with us. This is not a film about the lived experiences of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, whose truths we also honor. It does portray the parent experience. Watch with us, let yourself feel whatever emotions you have, and please carry those emotions forward and use them to partner with us to drive some real change. Thanks for joining us again, everybody. We're back, and we want to allow folks just a few minutes to process their thoughts and feelings before we meet our panel of parents and researchers. Just to give everyone a second, we have another poll that might allow people a little time to think about how this movie made them feel. Again, you can check any box that you identify with, not just one, and we'll get the poll up in just 1 second here. There we go. So how are you feeling after watching this documentary? Heard and seen? So many conflicting emotions I can't even begin to say. Like there's a lot of work to be done, ready to advocate for better, more supports for caregivers, overwhelmed, uncomfortable. And give me a minute, I just need time to process, or something else. So you can check again any box that resonates with you. It's a multiple choice. And in just a second, we'll have some results to share with you. As you're going to see, we all bring to this film our own lens and experience. And we may all react differently and take away our own acknowledgement. There we go. There's some results. Thanks, everybody, for that input. We've heard from many families that they see and hear others who have had a similar experience, and that helps right there. Feeling that they can do this just another day without feeling alone in this journey is really helpful sometimes. And other people find a sense of urgency that says they want to better support caregivers around them and their loved ones across their lifetimes. We were fortunate yesterday, or the day before yesterday, to have Amanda Dyer, one of the directors and producers of this film. We were able to interview her, and we have posted her interview on Clallam's website. It'll be available in just a few days, along with these panelist discussions. And we encourage you to watch why this film was made and how they included Lucas and his family in the film's decisions. It's a great interview. So now we're going to turn to our panelists, and I'd like to introduce you and say hello to our skilled facilitator, Luis Mendoza, and our panelist members. Luis is the executive director of the Washington State Fathers Network, and he's listened to hundreds of dads and families tell their stories and talk about the role of fathers in raising a child with disabilities. So Luis, take it away.
Thank you, Stacy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to join us. What I'd like to do first is give you an overview of how this is going to work and what we hope to accomplish. Our purposes with this panel session are to reinforce the message of the film that caregivers feel unseen and are lacking crucial supports. Have you hear from diverse local voices to show how this issue affects families across different diagnoses and social and cultural backgrounds within our own state. To convey clearly that it is not our children with disabilities who are the burden, it is the lack of support that is the burden. To put faces and names to real people in our communities, the children and their families who are struggling and unseen, which will help those of you who also feel unseen to know that you are not alone in this struggle. And to call out concrete recommendations for policy changes or supports that would help families like the caregivers you're about to hear from. For those of you who are elected officials, leadership from IDD systems of care, or other decision makers, we want you to hear specific recommendations regarding concerns the film and this panel identify. We have 4 questions for our caregiver panelists, and each will in turn succinctly answer each question. We also have a researcher on our panel who will briefly tie her work to the support needs of parent and family caregivers. Just so you know, the research papers of the researchers who've been on our panels for the last 3 days can be seen on the Clallam Mosaic website, which if it hasn't already been put on in the chat, will be put in shortly. And to get us started, I'd like to introduce today's panel. Joining us today are parent Whitney Storr, parent Alex Avena, parent Heather Avena, who is also a member of the Family Voices Committee at Yakima's Children's Village, and a Family Advisory Council member at Seattle Children's Hospital. Parent Amy Berkheimer, who works for the Parent program in Yakima, parent Joy Gaynor, who is a family advocate at Seattle Children's Hospital Autism Center, and researcher Haley Starr, who is a recent graduate and researcher from the University of Washington. Whitney, let's start with you with question number 1. And our first question is, please tell us very briefly about your family's caregiving situation and what feelings you have after watching this documentary.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Whitney Storr. My family, we live in Linwood, Washington, so not far from Seattle. For our caregiving situation, it's me, my husband, Jason, and our 4-year-old son, Malachi. Malachi was born with a congenital condition called spina bifida, hydrocephalus, which is a potentially fatal brain condition. He also had congenital heart defects. He has epilepsy. He's trach and ventilator dependent, feeding tube dependent, a wheelchair user. He's non-speaking. He requires 24/7 care. Everybody, he has to have eyes on him all the time. And it's just us. It's just me and my husband. We are his full-time caregivers. We don't have any nursing or anything. It's a lot of care. So that's our caregiving situation. The film for me, it was validating. It was a reflection of, what caregiving means to my family. I think the first time I saw this film, I spent the whole time going, yep, yep, tell me about it. So I think it was just kind of like I saw us reflected in that. And I think that was really needed and just a really great way to start this conversation.
Great, thank you very much, Whitney. Heather and Alex, welcome back to our panel. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, thank you, Luis. Yes, so we are Heather and Alex Avena. We have 4 kids, and Eva is our oldest. She's a twin, and she is the one that we receive caregiving, or we caregive for her, and we also we are able to receive a caregiver in our home. Eva has intractable epilepsy, which means her seizures are not controlled. And in addition, she has autism, ADHD, and cognitive delays. She's 15 years old, and so she's getting bigger. And for us, since her seizures are not controlled, she does need to have someone near her pretty much all the time, or 24 hours, just for safety concerns. And like I said, luckily right now we do have a caregiver, but she's kind of on her way out, which terrifies us a little bit. And as far as the film goes, same with Whitney. I mean, there were a lot of things that really resonated with us. I think the biggest thing for me especially was the family effect, that it's not just the child with a disability. The parents are also, our lives have been changed dramatically. And in addition, it affects all of her siblings.
Thank you. Alex, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, this film really mirrors a lot of what we go through as parents, and the parenting situation is different for every family. And I was commenting with my wife earlier that, it would be nice to hit like this emotional rock bottom, because at least you'd have something to stand on. But it's more like you're just constantly treading on this this abyss of wanting to, or trying to get enough rest to be able to care properly for your child. And we definitely there definitely is deficiency in the amount of care, or qualified care for that matter, that any of us can get, so that we may stay healthy enough to take all those shifts that we need to as parents, and keep it together for the rest of the family and for ourselves as well.
Thank you. Amy, let's have you take a turn at this, please.
Good morning. My name is Amy, and my husband Lonnie and I have one son. Eli is 17 years old and has cerebral palsy due to a brain injury during birth. He is severely affected by his injury. He's tube fed, is a wheelchair user, medically complex, and nonverbal. He is 24-hour care, and we have a nanny cam in his room with monitors throughout the house so we can keep an eye on him. The movie reminds me that I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. I do this work in Yakima and I meet lots of families, but it makes me so sad to know there are so many of us out there and everybody is struggling. And I hope this movie reaches all the right people to help make change happen to help us.
Thank you. Joy, can you tell us about your caregiving situation, please?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name's Joy. I'm a single parent to two daughters who are both young adults now. My oldest, Audrey, is the one who gives me that title of caregiver. Audrey is deaf, profoundly deaf. She is severely impacted by autism. She has extremely limited communication, and she requires that 24/7 line of sight supervision that everyone else has been talking about here. She needs that for behaviors which can be destructive, unaware of her own safety or other people's safety. And physically, she's pretty healthy and pretty energetic. So that can be challenging from that perspective. Watching this film, both the first time I watched it and as I've seen it over the past few days again, my top feeling has been one of relief, because I feel like these realities of my life are something that I've kind of kept hidden from nearly everyone whenever I can. But that is our reality, and it's scary to talk about how hard this level of caregiving is, because I feel like a lot of people just don't want to know or can't handle it. And also, I'm afraid that people are going to judge me for telling the truth about this and think that I don't love my daughter, which nothing could be further from the truth. I love her a lot, but life is challenging with a child like that.
Thank you. Let's move to question number 2. Which is, what are some specific supports you wish your family had that would allow everyone to thrive? We'll go in the same order. So Whitney, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I wish from the very beginning that we had better access to mental health services. I wish that we had been referred to a therapist at the very point of diagnosis, which for us was when I was pregnant. We had this thrown on our plate, and it was like, well, here's all the medical stuff we're going to do for your unborn child. And there was nothing that was given to us. Our world was rocked, our world was changed. And we were just, I think it was just expected that we were just going to, learn as we go or deal with it or, whatever that is. But I think that parent caregivers really need to have better connections to mental health services. And I think there needs to be mental health services that are specialized and experienced in supporting families that have kids with disabilities. And those are few and far between. They're really hard to find. I also think that we need to compensate parent caregivers. Right now in our state, if your child is under 18, you cannot be compensated. You cannot be paid as a parent caregiver. As soon as your child is 18, that's another story. But right now, women especially, but not always, but you often have a parent that leaves the workforce. They give up an income in the family, an income that is very much needed because it is very expensive to raise our children. It is much more expensive to raise our children. But you have one parent leave the workforce to provide this full-time care because it is necessary, because no childcare options exist for our kids. And so they sacrifice an income, but it's to perform literally nursing care. I'm a nurse. I'm a non-licensed, right? But I'm a nurse. I'm performing nursing care, but we don't get paid as nurses. and yet we sacrifice an income that is needed for families. And so I think that our policies around caregiver compensation in our state and in many other states across the nation need to change. And I think that would be a game changer for a lot of families.
Thank you. Lots of good information. Heather and Alex, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, Whitney just hits the nail on the head really well with that situation of us not being capable of having a full-time employment for the parents, not being able to provide adequately care or financially as well. It would be great. Honestly, it'd be a great benefit if the child's insurance would reach the parents that are taking care, and so that the parents can access those resources for mental health, for physical health. As the video said, right, this film, we are falling apart physically, we're falling apart emotionally, and there's no resources for us to pick ourselves up and rebuild ourselves. And I think this effect also happens, and it trickles on to the rest of the family. The siblings lose sleep, siblings lose social opportunities, siblings miss growing up as a kid because they have to at times intervene and become a third or a fourth parent. So it's very detrimental to the rest of the family. And we do this because we are the parents, and we love our children, and we will do whatever it takes. And unfortunately, that whatever it takes will sooner than later take away our ability, I think, to care properly for our own child. And we want to be good parents. We want to love them. But it's hard sometimes when you're dealing with behaviors, when you're dealing with lack of sleep for days on end. So accessing respite for the parents to be able to rest, I think, is essential, and maybe an opportunity to grow and to be able to take care of ourselves would be great. But there does need to be an overhaul of the parameters in which insurances work in, I believe.
Thank you. Heather, anything to add?
Yeah, one thing I would like to add is what we do need is competent and well-compensated caregivers. There's a lack of caregivers out there. Like I said, we've been fortunate to have a great one for our daughter, but she is moving on to a different career. And it's really hard because the caregivers are paid about the same as what you would be paid at fast food. And so, and it's a hard job. I'm not going to lie. It's hard. I mean, we do it all the time. It's hard. And so I would love it if there was more training for our caregivers specific to our kids. And then also that they were compensated accordingly, because I think you'll get more caregivers that way. You'll get people that want to do it. You'll get people that are, qualified to do it as well. So that's kind of the basics. But one thing, if we had a magic ball, what would I want for services? Another thing would be amazing would to have kind of a drop-in center respite for it would be so amazing, just because with our daughter, her seizures are so unpredictable, and there are nights that she'll have cluster seizures and they'll go on for 2 to 3 nights, and we are just exhausted, but we don't have caregivers at night. And how can you schedule someone when you don't know when her seizures are going to be? So that would be beyond, right? But that's something that we can talk about.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Amy, let's hear from you, please.
Thank you. Yeah, the caregiver piece is the biggest one for us. I feel that we need less hurdles to train caregivers to do the work that we need them to do. There is a interesting concept that when you have a baby and it ends up with some kinds of special needs, if you know immediately at the hospital, you get maybe 2 days of training on the equipment or things that you're being sent home with. And, you know, good luck with your newborn baby and all this extra special needs and equipment that you have to use to keep them alive. And so we put the work in, we learn the jobs, and most of the training that caregivers have to go through doesn't have a pediatric component to it. It doesn't discuss medical devices like tube feeding or things that would support a person with medical complexities. It doesn't teach how to support behaviors for children. So now that we have 17 years of experience, that should count for something in helping train the people that are coming into our home. Even when the nurse is in our home to delegate tasks to a caregiver that has gone through extensive training to be delegatable, it's still us teaching the person. The nurse just stands there and watches it and signs off that we showed them how to do it for our child. So getting people willing to do the work, letting us train them, and paying them well enough to attract people to want to stay in the profession obviously would be wonderful. And it would help us maintain having caregiver support in our lives without gaps and burnout. We've been fortunate. We've had some wonderful caregivers. Our current caregiver that's been with us 3 years has 1 week left with us. And here we go again, trying to figure out how we're going to juggle all of the ways to care for him.
Yeah. Lots of really good information. The caregiver theme obviously is coming up quite a bit. Joy, let's hear from you, please.
Yeah, you know, that my memories of those experiences with caregivers at home are so strong that when I heard both of you say, Amy and Heather and Alex talk about somebody's about to leave who's been, I just tensed up and felt ready to cry about it. I remember those moments. In our case, so Audrey doesn't live with me anymore. She's in supported living in a group home, and I asked for that placement for her when she was 15 years old, which was truly the hardest decision I've ever had to make. But I felt like I didn't have a choice because the support that we were getting at home through DDA just wasn't enough anymore. You know, when you have, say, 2 weeks of respite in a year, that does not make up for the other 351 nights when you're not sleeping as the years go by. And even though we were doing all the therapies for her and Audrey was making progress and actually still does, she was getting bigger and stronger and our family was falling behind. So one of the things that I want to stress, if it's not clear to folks who are listening already, is how life-changing that was when she moved out. It wasn't just like, oh, I finally get to have more free time to myself. It was really a question of the emotional and physical well-being of everybody in our family. By the time Audrey moved out, her sister was experiencing some pretty serious mental health issues, and I wasn't even aware of the extent of those until Audrey was away and I had a chance to focus on those. And her sister had done a good job of hiding them because she knew that she felt that her sister's needs, that Audrey's needs came first also. She loves Audrey. And getting that residential placement, we are an exception in Washington state. And I think it's really important for people to know that. There's so many families in this state who need supported living for their loved one with developmental disabilities. And families in crisis whose children have such high needs that none of the residential placements in our state will actually serve them. I see this regularly in my role at Seattle Children's as a family advocate at the Autism Center. And kids with IDD are being sent out of state at record levels because our state doesn't have the service and supports that would let them stay home and in their communities. So the other aspect of that is that even though Audrey has a placement now, it is precarious. It feels precarious. She's safe, her basic needs are being met, but she's a lot more isolated than she should be. She spends a lot of time at home, and that's because staff often don't have the skills that they need to take her out safely or to support her in ways that would help her enjoy the places that they go. And at one point with one of the agencies, I saw Audrey becoming truly depressed at that. So I advocated pretty strongly with that agency for better support. And what happened was, instead of working with us to get her what she needed, they fired us. They told her she had to leave. We got 2 weeks notice, which was terrifying because those spots are scarce, and finding a supported living spot is a very difficult thing to do. So now I'm really careful what I ask for. I feel like I have to advocate very gently and pick my battles. So what we need is for supported living and the staff there to be trained and paid in a way that allows them to really support the people that they are working with, and not just kind of babysit them at home. And we need to know that those placements are safe and secure for Audrey's lifetime, because I will not always be there to be the backup plan when that goes sideways.
Thank you all. Earlier, I had mentioned that we wanted the decision makers, any decision makers who are watching us, to hear some specific recommendations. And I think you've all given some great examples. So thank you for that. I'm curious, we have a couple of extra minutes, and so I want to see if anybody has anything else they'd like to add after hearing what you all said. But I do want to ask, Alex mentioned the effect on siblings. And I'm wondering if anybody has anything they can add to what kind of supports siblings might need or could use.
Well, I'll chime in. So, you know, Whitney mentioned kind of that it would be so great to have some mental health opportunities and resources for the parents, but I think that also goes for the siblings. And sometimes they don't want it and don't understand that. But I think it would be so nice, because if they do need it, that's on us. We got to figure out our insurance or pay by ourselves to make that happen. And I think what's forgotten a lot of times is that these siblings deal with a lot. Like I heard Joy say her other daughter had issues going on, and she didn't want to talk about it because she didn't want to be another burden. We see that with our own kids, and it's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking. And you want to help all of your kids, but you have a child who is demanding your time and your attention. Sorry. So I would love it if there was resources to help these kids in a way that is safe for them. I mean, where we live, fortunately, they do have a monthly group that gets together and they're able to meet with other kids, but I wish there was a little bit more than that.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment about siblings or anything else that you were reminded of as you heard each other talk?
Well, I have the opposite perspective. When you have a child that has so many needs and you think they're going to actually pass away on you multiple times a year due to breathing issues, it changed our path of even choosing to have more kids. And so we have one, and that hurt and was a process that we had to go through also.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. And we'd like to give you the opportunity to let us know a little bit more about your child and perhaps even brag about them a little bit. So the question we have now, and Whitney, we'll let you start off again, is we've heard many times today that our children are not the burden. The burden is the lack of services and supports to help families like yours. Please tell us about your child's skills, their strengths, and some of the joys of parenting this person.
Yeah, Malachi is an amazing kid. He's 4, so he's in his last year of preschool. Before he'll graduate on to the next step, whatever that is. He really is a joy. He has just the greatest personality. He's so much fun to be around. He lights up a room. He has the best laugh. It is loud and exuberant and just makes you smile. I think too, one of the amazing things that I've learned over these past 4.5 years of parenting a kid with disabilities is the fact that it opens you up to this amazing community of parents. Right now, like I'm zooming in from our car because today is the annual hydrocephalus walk in Seattle. And so this morning before this event, we were surrounded by this entire community of kids and other parents and families that all experience, this particular condition that my son shares. And it is just a warm community. It's a community that embraces you, and it's a community that just like welcomes you into that level of connection. And I think that for us has been the greatest just like unexpected surprise, and really just adds a lot to our ability to parent and just who we are as people and just how we connect with the world through our son and through other kids that are like him and other families that are kind of going through a lot of that similar stuff. And so his joy and our ability to connect with other kids and families, it really makes this parenting journey that we're on different, undoubtedly, but really amazing too.
Thank you. Have a great time at the event. I hope it's going well. Heather and Alex, let's go back to you.
Well, we're kind of trying to decide who's going to take the lead here. And I think it's me. Eva is a 15-year-old angel in our opinion. If there is a heaven, and we believe there is, she might be our ticket there. And because the life lessons that she has taught us are amazing. Eva loves unconditionally. Eva does not have the capacity to judge, and that's amazing and a great quality that a lot of us need to improve on. And she likes to live in the moment. She, just like as caregivers, we really can't plan that far ahead. Eva doesn't plan ahead at all. It's all right now, right? And so we get to see these little moments of what her true self is. Her real character comes out at times, and it's just like time stands still with her in these little moments that we get once in a while. And she just loves to take care of others. It's amazing that we are the caregivers, but if she senses that we are having a really bad day or a bad moment, she will come and try to comfort us. And that's amazing. That's a great quality that she has. And I mean, she has a lot of qualities, and she loves music. I don't know if you want to add anything else, or you're able to.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the thing I love about Eva is she's a free spirit, and she loves to be outside. She loves nature. She's my one kid that will always tell me, "Mom, look at the sunset." And I love it because I love it as well. And she is an artist. She's very abstract in her art, but sometimes it's like very profound as well. And that's pretty exciting to see. One thing about Eva is, like she struggles, cognitively. She's about a first grade level, but she can quote almost any Disney movie to the letter. She loves Disney, and she loves Disney princesses. And that would, she is kind of our princess. We love, he said she's an angel, and let me just make sure you understand. Yes, she has behaviors, but those angel-like qualities kind of remind us what's important. And I think that's what Eva does, is she kind of teaches us what's really important in life, because we get so wrapped up in other things, and she kind of brings it all back.
She keeps it real.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, perspective is a great thing. Great stories. Thank you. Amy.
Eli is a happy guy. He is so easy to be around. He's quite handsome, in my opinion, and his smile is just contagious. His communication is very limited to just his laughs and cries. We know what each one means, and that is something that a new caregiver has to spend some time around and learn what each different vocalization actually means in his world. He loves to watch movies, so he has 2 iPads, an iPod, and a TV placed at different areas around his bed. He spends most of his time in his bed to be safe. And he makes his choices about what he wants to watch that way. If he doesn't like a movie that we put on for him to listen to, even though there's 4 playing, there's only 1 with sound, he lets us know. He will cry and fuss until we change it. Even caregivers catch that one real quick. And that was his first communication to us at under a year old, when we started playing Sesame Street music. He hated certain songs and we would take him out of the playlist, but if he loved it, oh my goodness, he would smile and laugh, and we got some great pictures of him over the years because of that. Life with Eli is a blessing, and it has taught us what love really is, and it is pure and sweet. And if you don't take care of a child like ours, you will never know the peace of that love. And there's no judgment, like someone said. And we're just really lucky to have him as our son, and grateful that we get to take care of him. And I want to quickly say, for any self-advocates that are watching today, we hope that you know how much we love our children, and we want them to have the best lives possible. And that's why we are speaking up and speaking out. They need supports. We can't do it all. We are only human. My husband and I were older when we had our son. So as he has aged, so have we. And as we age and health issues affect us, that affects the less care that we can give our child who needs 24/7 care. And so please don't be offended by things being said today, because we need help. And it's a hard thing to have a child who needs you constantly for everything. My son would not be alive if we were not feeding him and taking care of him the way we do, with medical interventions and equipment and machines and electricity and things. So give us a little bit of grace as we share our stories, because we see you and we know you're out there and you're doing good work, but we have to be able to have a place to do work too, to help us. So thank you so much for everybody that came here today, no matter what your background is. We hope that good things happen because we are speaking up.
Thank you, Amy. Joy?
Thanks so much for saying that, Amy. I know we all share that sentiment. So I appreciate you bringing that up with such clarity. So Audrey is tall and strong and has a gorgeous smile. She is excited and happy about the simple things that bring her pleasure in life. And she shows it with, hand flaps and grinning and the happy shrieks, which are very different from the frustrated shrieks. You do learn to read those things. So, chocolate chip cookies, or I'm always searching for a new kind of cookie or treat that includes M&Ms in it that is going to make her excited because it's different and new. The tallest swings at the park, the swimming pool, those are things that, she just really enjoys the moment, and sometimes enjoys it so much she doesn't want to give it up when it's time for it to be over. One of the huge benefits of her living apart from me, and it happened right away and surprised me, I wasn't expecting it, is I got to be suddenly, instead of the exhausted therapist mom, I got to be the fun mom, who would go to pick her up and take her out in the car rides that she loves. And she has a very limited vocabulary. She uses sign language for the most part, doesn't have that many words, but it's amazing what you can communicate with just a few words of sign language. So Usually when I pick her up, she's standing there in her shoes and her coat ready to go because she knows what time I'm coming. That coat is on usually even in the hot summer because she knows the coat means that she's going out. And she makes sure with her words that we are going to do what she's expecting and what she wants. And if it's not going to happen the way she wants to, she'll do all she can to try to negotiate what she thinks should happen. So she's just a delightful person who endears people who are willing to take that time to understand her communication and support it in the ways that she needs. She just endears herself to them so easily, and it's a joy to watch that happen. She also has just a different way of looking at the world. And when I slow down and take the time for her to see that through her eyes, that's a gift. Just one brief example of a time that happened is when she was much younger and we were trying to teach her new words all the time. And so we were working on the word dog, the sign for dog. Every time we were out and saw a dog, and there were a lot in our neighborhood, I'd say, "Hey, Audrey, look at the dog," and I'd sign it. And she not only never signed it back to me, but never really seemed to not be paying attention, which was very common at that time. Until one day we passed a little teeny fluffy dog at the end of a leash with little flappy ears. And I said the same thing, "Look, Audrey, there's a dog." And she stopped and she looked at me and she signed cat. And in that moment, I saw what she had been seeing all that time. I signed dog to her was, "These are all completely different animals, Mom. So why are you giving me just one word to cover them all? I'm going to hang out here until this makes sense to me and not even engage in that communication." So that's my girl.
Yeah. Thank you all for letting us get to know your children a little bit better. We appreciate that. Moving on to our final question. We'd like to give you the opportunity to share any wisdom or advice you have for families who are just starting out on this journey of caring for a loved one with special health or behavioral needs. Whitney, any ideas or any advice or wisdom to share?
Yeah, there was a comment in the Q&A section earlier from a newer mom of a young child, and talking about how it's hard those first couple of years, especially. Not that, like, we talk about this a lot, like, does it get easier, or do you just get more used to the care you provide? And in my experience, I think it's more the second. I think that, as your child grows, you grow and you step into the care, maybe. At least that's our experience. I think, for those who are new to caregiving, I think you have to just connect. You have to reach out to other families. You take advantage of every resource that is offered to you. You get involved with parent support groups. Go and get involved with community organizations that, allow you to find other families and other parents. Because it can be really hard at home, but at least, if you connect to other families, like, you have other people there that at least understand when you talk about those difficulties. And it might not, like, take away the challenges, but it's at least somebody that can be that shoulder and can understand where you're coming from. And I think there's really a lot of value in that. I would also say, I think it's really important that caregivers get involved in advocacy as soon as possible. If we want things to change, we have to share our story. And I think it's also important that we don't shy away from sharing our story. Like, I think it can be really scary a lot of times, because we don't want people outside of our circle of caregivers to think that we don't love our kids, that we view our kids as a hardship, that we view, caring for somebody with a disability as this, really difficult, hard thing. But, like, if we don't share our stories, then none of these things change. We don't get respite. Parents aren't going to be compensated. Medicaid's not going to be accessible to all kids with disabilities. Like, our caregivers are not going to be paid more. And also, there was another comment in the Q&A question that I think we really need to, I think it deserves to be brought up too, is you heard it in the film, the intersection between low caregiver pay and sexism and racism and ableism. And I think that's really important too, and how that connects. Like, you know, a lot of our caregivers that are low wage or for family caregivers unpaid are women. There is a high degree of, you know, pay related sexism in that. A lot of them are people of color, women of color. You know, the mom mentioned in the film how even her child with disabilities can't access, you know, these camps that are intended for kids with disabilities because his type of disability is too severe for what those so like you have that degree of ableism too. And so none of those things are going to be addressed if people in our positions don't get involved and call that out and ask those questions about why is that the case? Why are women and women of color who are caregivers not receiving the compensation they deserve? What is the connection there? And why aren't policymakers doing anything about that? So please, get involved in advocacy.
Thank you. Since you brought up the advocacy, I wanted to mention in the chat that there's been a lot of good information posted, and some of it has to do with how to get involved as an advocate. So please take a look if you haven't seen it yet in the chat. Heather and Alex, wisdom or advice to share?
I probably both. But the first thing I want to say is for those who are listening to us that took the time to be here today, thank you. Thank you for caring enough to do this. We really do appreciate it. And please never assume anything. Just if you have questions, ask us. I don't think we would be offended if you ask us what's going on or how does this affect you. It's okay to ask questions. We prefer everybody to be aware than unaware, right? And I think that one piece of advice that I can offer as a parent of a child who needs a lot of care is you don't have to have all the answers at once. I don't think we could handle all the answers at once. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. I think we have to break up our day. Even now, when we think we know what we're doing, we have to break up our days in moments and take one moment at a time, because this really frustrating moment right now will be overridden by a big smile or a giggle from the child, right? So just take one moment for what it is, and don't be hard on yourself. I mean, we make mistakes all the time, and we don't have all the answers. We're not professionals. We're not behavioral therapists. We're not nurses, and we make mistakes, and it's okay, because we're learning, and we're taking this risk to care for our own children with all the love that we have, and because of the love that we have. So just love your child and do what is best for your child. What feels best in your heart. It's a labor of love.
Thank you.
And I'll just add to that. I think, sometimes you don't really understand what's going on, so don't be afraid to ask questions. I would say that for new parents. And if something doesn't feel right to you, get that community of friends that you've made, other parents, and ask their opinions, ask people that have gone on before you, maybe have a little more experience, because their experience is so valuable. And I think since it's a kind of a limited number of people that understand this world, everyone I've met is really, really happy to share. We want people to be successful. Another thing that actually was such an epiphany for me when we were kind of first starting with our daughter Eva, is learning that grief is part of the process. I don't think I ever understood that before, watching families that have kids with disabilities, that they are grieving. And so I think if you know that beforehand, it makes it a little easier when it comes up, when there's milestones they don't reach, or when you see their twin sister learning how to drive and they don't get to drive. like grief is going to happen. So I think that's good to be aware of that. The other thing that I think is really important is try to laugh when you can, because otherwise things are very, very heavy. So find some positivity in what you're doing. And remember that, remember that it's a moment, just like Alex was saying, like it's a moment, right? Like I can get through this moment. Sometimes I have to remind myself, okay, I can get through this night. This night's going to happen and then I'll be done with this night. And let's see what tomorrow night brings. And so the other thing I would just add is to give yourself grace. We're human. I get mad. There are times we're human and we're parents, and I do get upset sometimes. You know, one thing about Ava is she is kind of a peacemaker, and so she notices right away when we're upset, like he said, and sometimes she'll just blurt out, "You're so pretty, Mom. You're so pretty, Mom." And that kind of like makes my day, because I'm like, it kind of brings me back, like, okay, this is a moment, give myself grace, and let's move forward. So and the other thing I think has been mentioned a lot, but really surround yourself with a village, really surround yourself with people that want to know about your child, that want to learn more, and keep them close.
Thank you.
Real close.
Thank you. Amy, any advice for wisdom to share?
Absolutely. When Eli was in the NICU still as a baby, a nurse told me that if I were to give you a map of where you would be in 5 or 10 years, you probably wouldn't be able to handle it. It's the daily journey that trains us to be ready for what the next hurdle might be. When you think ahead too far, you're adding burdens to your current day that you don't need. And that has been my favorite piece of advice. And I still think of it to this day, and I share it with everybody that I can, because I think that it helps you put in perspective. Sometimes, you know, it is one day at a time, but we've had times where it was literally 1 minute at a time. When you're in an ER situation and they're trying to revive your child, it's really scary, and your time and space is different than the real world. And so we just have to know that this is a journey and we're learning and growing. Also, accept help when people offer it when your child is young, because you may think you can do it all, and you probably can when they're young and you're young, but they are going to get older, and you are going to get older, and they are going to need people in their life who understand them, who maybe know some of their communication, who know some of their medical tasks, who know those things about how your family works and does things. And if a crisis happens, they can step in. One thing I haven't shared, this is our third viewing of this film, is my husband and I and our son and our caregiver all got COVID the same week earlier this year. And it's really tough when you're so sick that you only want to be in bed, but you still have to do very physical tasks to change a 5'9" teenager in his bed and put clothes on him and do all of his care. And we were exhausted, and the only help we were offered is that if we couldn't care for him, we needed to call 911 or CPS. That was the most devastating thing that has happened in our life so far, because my husband has health issues as he is older than I am, and I'm still here to pick up the pieces when he can't. When we were both down, it made us realize, whoa, this is not a one-person job. What would we do if something happens to one of us? I cannot get sick. I cannot have a medical emergency. I'm so glad I don't have my appendix, because I can't spend a night in the hospital, right? There's so many things that people don't think about, that we have got to have those supports. Make your village huge and let people know your kid and know your family. And I know it's hard to let people in your home, but I guarantee you when they're older, you'll be glad you did.
Thank you, Amy. Joy, Any advice to offer?
You know, I can't top the advice that's been shared by these other parents that have brought tears to me. The one thing I will say is, in my role at Seattle Children's as a family advocate, I interact with families almost every day who are new to the diagnoses that they're getting. And so I want to say to the people that I know are listening here, what I say to them, you are doing a great job. No matter what you're doing, and no matter how confusing the systems seem and the list of to-dos, you are doing a great job. Be good to yourself.
Thank you. And thank to all of you for giving us a peek into your life as caregivers, sharing what supports you need, and letting us learn a little bit more about your wonderful children. Now I'd like to turn to the researcher on our panel, Haley Starr, and ask, given what you've just heard from these panelists, in what ways does this align with your research and the support needs of families and parent caregivers?
Yeah, thank you, Lewis. So again, my name is Haley, and I'm a recent graduate from the University of Washington, and I'm in the process of applying to medical school right now to go into developmental pediatrics. And so throughout undergrad, I worked part-time as an in-home caregiver for a lot of these families and have grown up a friend of people with disabilities. And so that led to a research project that really focused on the disability parent community in Washington State, and specifically how parents who are newly diagnosed or families who are newly diagnosed learn how to navigate the health system from other disability parents. And so our system is failing these parents in one regard, when in terms of just not providing them with support as they learn how to navigate the health needs that their children have. And so the disability parent community has shown a lot of resistance to this gap in our system, and has really highlighted the true complexity and what we need to change. And so, everything that was talked about today was echoed in research and has been echoed by other researchers as well. These families need quite frankly, need the perception of the state to change, because the level of support that the state provides is just far from enough in too many regards. My project focused on healthcare, and so talked about increasing patient navigation and care coordination systems in order to support parents as they learn how to go about this. But beyond that, just making our systems more uniform and easily accessible. And then I worked as a home care aide, and as people talked about, I paid for my own home care aide training, and I was paid minimum wage as a state employed caregiver, but was offered 3 or 4 times more than that pay if I went into the private realm. And that's just, it's extremely inequitable for families who come from lower financial backgrounds and can't offer to pay caregivers that much. We just need to have a greater focus on these families overall. We need to increase mental health supports. There's correlations between caregiver mental health and developmental outcomes of children and how children are able to grow and thrive. And it's really important to think about the ways that disadvantaged groups often face greater barriers in all of this. And so there needs to be even greater recognition and action taken for them. The last thing I'll say is outsiders like myself won't ever fully be able to understand what it's like to parent and caregive for a child with a developmental disability. And so we really need to just make room, like we are today, to listen to parents and people with disabilities and encourage the state and our state systems to really advocate for change so that we can give parents the tools to not only advocate for their kids, but also just get to parent their kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you for joining us. It's nice to know that there is research being done that supports the message of the film and the real life experience of caregivers like the ones we had on today's panel. Now, as we wrap up this portion of the webinar, I want to again thank our panelists for joining us and sharing their stories and information. I can assure you that the amount of time that we gave them to do this is wholly inadequate, given their caregiving experience or the research that they've done. For those of you who are caregivers, I hope that you feel less alone and also more inclined to share with others especially decision makers, your experience, and the supports that you need. If you are a legislator or other decision maker, I hope that you'll see this as an important opportunity to learn about what these families experience, the supports that they need, and the changes that you can help drive so that caregivers no longer feel unseen. Thank you for listening, and now I'll turn things back to Stacy.
Thanks, Louis. And what a great panelist discussion. As a sibling myself, I can tell you that those siblings you're all raising will gain resiliency and will prove to be valuable advocates over time. Many of my colleagues are siblings. Siblings, as Louis mentioned, will have the longest relationship with a person with a disability in most cases, and they have a stake in their brother and sister's outcomes. So keep an eye on that. What happens now? So where do we go from here? How do we take what we've learned today and create some action? We're going to take just a few minutes to talk about advocacy steps. Please don't leave too early. Just stay to the end if you could and leave us your name and email address so that you could get involved. We have a couple of suggestions here. First of all, sign up to receive action emails. And if you're following the chat, there were a number of ways that you could get involved and receive emails from the ARC and Clallam, Mosaic, and any of the other 14 sponsoring organizations here. We all want you to feel connected. We don't want you to feel alone. And we're all working in some way with families. Learn to share your story with legislators, much like the Ronnie family did here today, our panelists did here today. It's really just a matter of opening up your heart and being willing to let people get to know your child. Let them hear your story. And if you can get that down to just a few minutes, it's even better for legislators. But they respond so much better when they know you and your situation, and they feel much more accountable to real people. So give them a call, just make an appointment. You can join your local parent and family coalition. Each of the ARCs will help you connect to that. These organizations will all help you connect. Some of them sponsor the parent family coalitions that are here, and they'll give you the courage and confidence you need to keep sharing your story and know in what direction to head. And then in November is National Family Caregivers Month. You can raise your voice during this time. Social media is super powerful. In addition, this film, Unseen, will run for free in honor of Family Caregivers Month. So make sure that you stay in touch with the Unseen website, and our organizations will all be promoting that as well. And then just learn more about our state's policies and how you can get involved in improving situations for caregivers. So I want to share a couple of basic facts about Washington State. Over 80% of people with developmental disabilities live with their families, most for their lifetime. We have over 2,100 senior family caregivers that are still caring for their son or daughter, many well into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, with no way to plan for their child's future when they can no longer provide care. And nationally, 1 in 5 people have been waiting over 10 years for services. That is certainly a challenge in our state as well. You've heard tonight about, or today, sorry, this morning, about the economic impacts of caregiving as one or more family members drop out of the workforce. And they do that due to lack of childcare, appropriate schooling, no after-school care, lack of adult services. And as aging caregivers reach retirement, we see they have their own increased care needs. So Washington State continues to rank in the bottom 15 states in the nation in spending on developmental disabilities. And that spending has gone down by 7% over the last 5 years. We are well below the national average in fiscal commitment. We have over 14,000 people eligible and waiting for services. And we have individuals increasingly with developmental disabilities stuck in acute care and inpatient hospitals because there's nowhere for them to go when they and their families are in crisis. While DDA, just remember this, while DDA is tasked with providing services, it can only do that when our state legislature commits the funding to allow for a robust system of quality care for residential supports, housing, and permanent forecasting of our need, so that we're always at the front of the budget. We're going to need your help to advocate for this change. And the next slide shows just a couple of things that we're going to focus on. As parents You don't need to know necessarily the budget tool that we use in Washington State called caseload forecasting and all its intricacies. What you do need to know is it places us at the front of the budget for planning, just like we all do for our budgets. The most important things come first: housing, making sure that we have food, making sure we have transportation. The state budget writers do the same thing. And we have a thing in our state called the Caseload Forecast Council. It budgets for things at the front of the budget, like education, our state prisons, foster care, childcare, making sure that our aging seniors get supports in their communities, and developmental disabilities is not there. We need to ensure that we are there to protect from future cuts and to ensure that our state makes this a priority. We have a November caseload forecast coming out for the very first time. So state legislators will have very specifically how many people can they serve, what services will they get, and what is it going to cost. And we have heard for many years from legislators, you know, we want to do this, but we can't write a blank check. We need more information and data. And they are going to get some of that data in November, and they need to commit to it. In addition, we need to be permanently and formally added to the Caseload Forecast Council. Legislators who are listening to this today, they know exactly what we're talking about, and for you to reinforce that with them is really important. In addition, we have a DD housing study, that 2 reports that will come out in November and December that will hopefully lay out a roadmap for legislators to invest in housing so that people with developmental disabilities can live in their communities with supports and not be in institutional settings. That is a very critical ask that we're making this session. So this event came together with a lot of passion by a number of local Washington organizations that support families raising children with developmental disabilities. We just want to thank them again. They're here. A very, very special thank you to Clallam Mosaic, Priya Jayadev, and Catherine McKinney for spearheading all of the logistics and coordination for this event. They've been amazing. We want to thank our panelists one more time for sharing their stories. And a special thank you to the filmmakers, Tom and Amanda Dyer, and for bringing the Ronnie's story to us. Thank you to the Ronnie family. And most importantly, and especially thank you to Lucas. So we're going to end our showing today sharing that if you know a parent or caregiver in your life, please think about just how to see them. As you may have learned today, that's really important. Here's a few just simple suggestions. I just want to mention, we added the bottom one after the first day of our showing because we realize it's important to let people watching today who may be with their friends, who may be professionals, that it really, really matters when other people who don't necessarily have skin in this game advocate for these changes. Legislators see that families have these needs and they need to get them met. They definitely listen when everybody around them says the same thing. So take a minute to think about the change that you can make. So when we end our show today, we're hopeful that you might complete our post-viewing survey. It should launch on the closing of this link. It's going to ask you 4 things. Would you like to be added to our advocacy email list? Would you like to be added to the Unseen documentary email list? Are you interested in contacting your legislators to help improve supports for caregivers in Washington State? And then there will be an opportunity for you to add your name and email address. And we really hope that you will. Again, this has been an amazing 3 days of showings and panel discussions. We will make sure, and all of us will post the panel discussions and the recording. We'll watch for more showings of this movie. We thank everybody again for being here with us. It's a wrap, and bravo. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.